Hey, this is Sam Black with my this is the second round with my red-black deck, but unfortunately my first round opponent didn't show up, so this was the first match that I played with this deck. Obviously this opening hand, while it has a good curve and a lot of power and synergy, with only one land, I can't keep it, so I mulligan into this not as good hand, but it's a grower. It has a lot of potential. The ring is very good, and I have a good mix of lands and spells, even if the spells aren't perfect by themselves. But my top card is Giant Scorpion, which really pulls this whole hand together. It gives me a curve of ring into Scorpion, and then I can equip the Scorpion, and then I have the Jester and the Essence Drain for later game plays. Most of my lands and spells are good draws, so obviously I put the Giant Scorpion on top, and then we're just gonna play a game. My deck will be functional, not an amazingly aggressive start or anything, just a solid plan of playing a Scorpion and letting it grow. My opponent's not coming out too fast, which is exactly what I'm hoping for. Draw a Magma Quake, which isn't great with the number of lands I have, but it's a powerful enough card that it's difficult to be too disappointed when you see it. And my opponent plays a 3/3, so I'm going to equip, and I could play Krenko's Command, but I'm just going to pass here because I don't think it's worth paying 3 life to play the Krenko's Command. Next turn, my Scorpion's going to get a counter, and then it'll be a 2/4 Death Touch, at which point I can cast the Krenko's Command and not take 3 damage. Given that I have a spell-heavy land-light hand, there's definitely an argument for just using my spells, because I'm potentially going to be constrained on mana throughout the game, but the problem is that I just don't think that Krenko's Command accomplishes that much being in play. Like, these goblins aren't going to do anything, and well, it's nice to get them out in advance of the Arms Dealer to use as fodder, so that on turn 5 I can go Arms Dealer, play it, activate, sacrifice a Krenko's Command token. Against blue-green in this format, it's relatively safe to just play the Arms Dealer by itself, and then in the future I can play Krenko's Command and activate Arms Dealer in the same turn, sacrificing a token. So if my opponent were playing a different color combination, I think it would make more sense to potentially prioritize casting the Krenko's Command earlier, but against blue-green specifically, because I can just play the Arms Dealer by itself, I think there's less pressure in that direction, and so I decided to just hold the Krenko's Command, because I figured that getting 2 goblin tokens in play now wasn't worth the 2 life that it would likely cost me. So my opponent plays a Jace's Phantasm, and just gonna have to pass the turn. I draw another land, and I decided to play the Krenko's Command rather than one of the other things. It's just nice to have the 2 mana up, and if I draw a land, then I can play the Arms Dealer and activate it and sack a token. If I play the Arms Dealer here instead of the command, then I can definitely activate Arms Dealer next turn, which is nice, but I don't know that it's particularly necessary, and I would prefer to avoid playing Arms Dealer into open mana, because blue-green's best answer to it is going to be Rewind or Essence Scatter. So just play the Krenko's Command here, and then pass the turn, and my opponent is going to Rancor the Jace's Phantasm, get a bit of a clock going. Obviously with all the removal I have, I'm not too worried about that. So I draw a Phoenix, which I decided to just cast, and it would be reasonable to attack with the Scorpion there, but with the Scorpion growing and an Arms Dealer in my hand and a Phoenix that can come back, I figure I really have the late game locked up here, and I don't want to trade the Phoenix for the this thing. I don't want to chump block because the Goblin tokens each represent 4 damage, and I don't want to trade 3 damage for 3 damage, so it's better to just hold the Giant Scorpion back. My opponent gets real aggressive here, casting Sleep with 6 power in play when I'm at 17. So, not terribly dangerous, but represents that my opponent is really intent on killing me. So I think we agree that the late game is going to go my way. So I draw land here, and I deploy the Arms Dealer. It would be pretty bad if my opponent had Essence Scatter here, but on the other hand, it's really good if they don't. So I think it would be reasonable to cast the Essence Scatter on the Jace's Phantasm here, but I went with the Arms Dealer and didn't get punished. I think part of the thinking there is if my opponent's casting Sleep here rather than playing a creature, they probably don't have a lot of they probably don't have another creature in their hand. They'd just play another creature first if they had it. And so they're not likely to tap out again. So a counterspell is going to get my Arms Dealer at some point either way. And given casting Sleep here, there's a reasonable chance that they have another reach spell or tempo spell of some sort. So I guess that's just one card toward not having Essence Scatter. Also, given that they're making these aggressive tempo plays, there's an advantage to not letting my opponent know that I have the Essence Drain, which also pointed me toward playing the Arms Dealer rather than the Essence Drain, so that I would have a surprise Gain 3 life to let my opponent go further down this non-winning line and then find out when it's too late that I can gain life. At least that's the hope. Oh, also, I think most importantly to my actual thought process was if I Essence Drain, my opponent gets the Rancor back, and I'm actually only preventing 1 damage. My opponent just puts the Rancor on the Primal Hunt Beast and hits me for 5 there. Whereas the Arms Dealer can kill my opponent's creature in combat. So that's the biggest reason. The other stuff that I was talking about, certainly not totally irrelevant considerations, but the Arms Dealer, it's much better to have an instant speed removal spell against Rancor, so especially when the Rancor is on a creature that's a 1/1 flyer by itself. So that's why I went with the Arms Dealer. And of course, I could chump block and kill the flyer, but Arms Dealer is way more valuable than 3 life, so I'm just going to sack a token, kill the flyer, take 3, go to 8, still pretty comfortable, and my opponent plays a Centaur Courser. I draw another Mountain, which is actually a pretty good draw because I have a lot of good things to do with my mana, and I'm just going to kill the Courser right away. I'm not going to get a Rancor with it. My opponent's not going to play a Rancor on the Courser when the Hexproof creature is in play and I have mana up, so I just don't want to pass. My opponent maybe draws a Forest, plays Rancor on this thing, and then attacks me, and maybe has like a Titanic Growth. I guess if I block first, that's not a big deal, but especially against a green deck, it's good to just kill their creatures on your turn, just as, best practice. And I'm going to leave the Scorpion back to block the Hunt Beast and attack with the Phoenix. And I'm just going to play the Battle Jester. So now my opponent's going to play the Rancor and attack with the thing. Now I did mention that my opponent probably has another tempo spell here when they played the Sleep, but I don't think it's worth blocking with everything in case my opponent can answer this. Then, if my opponent has something like an Unsummon to get this out of play, then these two would trade for the Hunt Beast. But I don't really want to trade these for the Hunt Beast. They're really powerful cards to have in play, and that's only a concern if my opponent has unsummon. Now, my opponent clearly has something. They're sending a 5/3 into a 5/7 Death Touch, and they only have blue mana up, so they can't really have anything other than unsummon or shrink. And shrink doesn't get them anywhere. It's still a 7 toughness creature, or whatever that thing is called, the Hydroblast, whatever, Hydro something. The thing that is -5 power. It's a blue shrink. It is in the set. So anyway, probably going to get unsummoned here. So my opponent's going to bounce this and hit me for 5 trample if I just block here. But I'll still be at 3, and I have Essence Drain, and I can replay the Scorpion, and I'm not being presented with lethal here. So I decided to just let my opponent use the presumed unsummon. That happens, I go to 3, and now I'm going to play the Scorpion, and unfortunately my opponent has Rewind to counter it. So now I'm going to play the Duty Bound Dead and put a ring on it, and I'm just going to pass so that I can double block with the Phoenix and the Battle Brawler to take down this Hunt Beast, and hopefully not take lethal. Could throw an extra guy in there to be safe, but I don't really want to lose another guy, and I'm just hoping my opponent doesn't have more tricks. And if I block with one more, I'd have to block with everything to not die to Titanic Growth, which wouldn't be great. So hope my opponent's out of stuff, and my opponent seems to be, so that works out. And my opponent just has a follow-up creature in the form of a big spider. I draw another Arms Dealer, which I cast after killing it, I guess. Oh no, I decided not to cast it. I kill it and then just pass with mana to bring back the Phoenix. My opponent plays a Yeva's Force Mage and a Primadox, excuse me. So I bring back the Phoenix, and now I'm going to play the Arms Dealer and kill the Primadox, and pass because I'm at 2, and I have a 2/4 Regenerator against a 2/2 when my opponent has Rancor in hand. And now I'm going to clear the path. And I even have a Searing Spear now for safekeeping. Attack for 4. And now I've really taken control. Opponent has Acidic Slime, kills my ring. I kill the Acidic Slime, get in for some more hits, play the Phoenix. My opponent plays a 2/1, puts Rancor on it, and I'm just going to deal with the Rancor forever and kill this creature to probably win. My opponent's down to 1 card. These 2 are lethal, and that does it. So then in the second game, I'm on the draw here, of course. And I have early plays and a Magma Quake that I can play too, so totally fine keep. That's a great draw. Exalted 1-drop into Exalted 2-drop is basically always great. Another good follow-up. But my opponent also has a pretty solid curve here of just 2/1 into 3/3. I send in the Knight, offering to trade it for the Courser, which I don't really want my opponent to trade here, but I also, these exalted creatures are bad at blocking and my opponent has a lot of power, so I don't think I can afford to just hold back. So I offer the trade and my opponent declines, which is the outcome I'm hoping for, really. And then I play this Tormented Soul. And my opponent's gonna come in because I don't really have blocks. I take 5, and then my opponent plays another 3/3. And now my creatures are kind of outclassed, even though I have evasion and my opponent doesn't. I'm attacking for 3 here and my opponent's cracking back for 8. So, not the best situation. Obviously I can block some of that 8, but I'm going to need to Magma Quake my way out of this pretty soon. So my opponent doesn't want to trade 2/1s, just attacks with those things. I block. I'm only taking 3 here rather than, the 8 that I was talking about, but it does cost my turn. I have to spend 4 mana to regenerate to make that happen. And my opponent has an Acidic Slime, which is pretty bad for me because it sets me back on being able to Magma Quake while developing their board. So I draw a Krenko's Command, and I could cast it to chump block and buy some more time, but I'm making two blocks but giving up 1 block, and so using a card for a single block doesn't really seem great, so I just pass with mana to use the Duty Bound Dead. My opponent attacks with these things. Block there. Maybe I should have blocked with the Acidic Slime, but my thinking here is if I play 1 more land, then I can attack with this thing, get 2 Exalted Triggers to make it a 2/4, and then I can Magma Quake to kill everything but it. And if I lose my Exalted Trigger, then I won't be able to keep a creature, and I think it's kind of important to keep a creature. So I don't trade, just take the 2 extra points, and my opponent passes with all their mana up. So because they didn't play another creature or use their mana, I can't actually keep a creature if I Quake for 3, because my opponent can just Void Stalker the Duty Bound Dead. So I just send in the 1/1, and I decide to, let's see, the 1/1 attacks, my opponent swaps with the Void Stalker, and then I just decide to Magma Quake. Unfortunately, my opponent has Negate. So now, this big play that I've been planning on to get me back into the game is countered, and I'm way behind my opponent's bigger creatures. My opponent gives themselves 3 3/3s. I have to chump block and go to 1. I draw Arms Dealer, but I just don't have enough mana to be able to use it and the goblins to kill my opponent's larger creatures. So I have to just play my other goblins, keep the Arms Dealer, but now I have to chump block with everything, and there's really no coming back from this. So all my guys die, I draw a land, and I'm at 1, and I guess technically I could have block, sack Arms Dealer, kill this to not die for a turn, but then I have no creatures, my opponent has 2, plus whatever they draw. From there, I suppose I could have drawn Essence Drain for this, if my opponent draws nothing to fog with this, and then I could have drawn like a Phoenix to trade with this and come and pick it up. So I guess technically it was a premature concession, but the string of events that leads to me coming back there is extremely improbable. So I just didn't want to bother. Game 3. If it were, obviously if it were a Pro Tour, I'd play it out and be miserable, but in a draft like this, that's, I'm willing to give up a fraction of a percent. So, anyway, on the play for Game 3, this hand's outstanding. I have the Duty Bound Dead, the Ring to put on it. That'll be a good growing clock. Giant Scorpion to play defense, along with Side Searing Spear, so I don't have to worry about my opponent just outracing me with 3/3s. This thing, if I can just slow the game down a bit with these, removal spell type things, then this thing grows out of control. So, great start. Play the Duty Bound Dead. And I'm going to play the Ring because I want to be sure that I can start something growing next turn, whereas if I play the Tormented Soul, I need to draw a land to put the Ring on something on the following turn. It's also just more mana efficient overall when I have a lot of cards that allow me to spend my mana pretty smoothly, and I'm Landlight, and Sign in Blood is something that I need to like work into my curve when I have a moment. So just, you know, if I draw an extra land, I can equip the Ring and Sign in Blood, or it's much better to spend 2 mana rather than 1 mana on that turn. And the Tormented Soul is +1 damage on this turn, I guess, but that's not a big deal. Put the Ring on the Tormented Soul because it's the creature I want to be attacking with, because it has more power and can't be blocked. Attack for 3, and again, this is a hand where I really prioritize mana efficiency, so I'm going to play the Scorpion here. And my opponent encrusts my Tormented Soul and puts a Rancor on the Courser. Now, because I have this Ring that I'm pretty confident is going to win the late game, I don't want to be trading blows. I just want to trade off cards, get the Ring on something, and then win with the +1/+1 counters that it generates. So, just going to trade Scorpion for the Courser. Also, I want to keep green creatures off the board so that my opponent's Ring can't get going. And now I'm going to play a Duty Bound Dead, put the Ring on the new Duty Bound Dead, attack with the old one. This way, if my opponent has another Uncrossed, if they want to put it on the Duty Bound Dead that's growing, I'll have a blocker. So that's the upside to not putting that on the creature that's attacking now. The opponent plays a Void Stalker and puts a Rancor on it. I draw a 5-drop, and I still haven't drawn a land here. Attack with this thing. It gets bigger. And now, because so Void Stalker is just a removal spell, right? It can tap and pay some mana to get rid of a creature. So I don't want to be fully invested in one creature. So I'm just going to move the Ring over to the other Duty Bound Dead after playing a Krenko's Command. Normally you want all the counters on one thing when you have Exalted and you're trying to attack with one thing, but I just don't want all my eggs in one basket against a known removal spell. Even if, I mean, this isn't like it's a huge creature or anything, but as it starts getting more counters, it becomes a pretty big deal. So rather just divide it up. My opponent has Yeva's Force Mage to get in a pretty big hit here, but I'm so far ahead that it's not really a problem to just take it. So I still haven't drawn a land. I'm just on 3 lands. Some spells I can't cast, and a Searing Spear. And I'm just going to get in with same situation. I want the Ring on the creature that's going to be untapped because it lets me regenerate for 2 mana, and the Encrushed thing that I was talking about, so I just attack with the one that doesn't have the Ring because they're the same size. And that gets in for 3. Now my opponent is going to cast Acidic Slime, and I don't know, I'm not sure, hard for me to guess if they're going to kill the Ring or my land. They're both pretty good targets. My opponent goes for the Swamp. I don't use it in response because 2 mana is the same as 3 for me. The things that I can do with my mana are regenerate the Duty Bound Dead and cast Searing Spear. And then my opponent attacks with Yeva's Force Mage, 3/3 Trampler. My options here, I can just block and pay 2 to Fog here, or I can block with everything, and then if my opponent wants to force me to spend 2, this creature dies. Otherwise, my opponent can trade the Force Mage for the 2 1/1s. And these 1/1s really aren't doing anything. My opponent has a 2/2 I have exalted creatures that are attacking. My exalted creatures regenerate, so death touch isn't a big deal. So I think just trading the 1/1s for the Eva's Force Mage is a pretty good deal. And my opponent accepts. Also, that Eva's Force Mage might be a 3/3 now, but next turn it's going to be a 4/4 Trampler, so getting it off the board is pretty great. Now, at this point, I could use my Searing Spear to take out one of the blockers, so that if my opponent blocks with the other, I regenerate, my opponent's out of creatures. But this creature is going to be able to attack for 4 this turn. It's going to get a counter from the ring to go up to 2, and then I have 2 exalted triggers. My opponent's at 7, obviously, so if I get in for 4, then the Searing Spear is lethal. So I want to keep the Searing Spear to be able to shoot my opponent, because if they don't block, they're dead. And if they do block, if they block with the Acidic Slime, I just have to regenerate and pass, and that's fine. If they block with the Void Stalker, then I get to Searing Spear the Acidic Slime, and both my opponent's creatures are dead, and it's basically the same thing as if I had used the Searing Spear on the creature. So, the only situation where it's better is if my opponent blocks with Acidic Slime, and I'm not worried about losing that game. My opponent loses their Acidic Slime, I spend my turn, I'm at 12, my opponent has a 4-power creature, no green creatures to grow with the ring. And I just don't think it's that likely of a play for my opponent to make. So I just don't do anything, and I make the attack for 4, which my opponent doesn't know is lethal, and so they take it, and I fire off the Searing Spear. So I won a game of Limited with 2 mountains in play as my only lands, though of course, obviously, as you see, I have 3 black creatures in play. The 1 swamp that I had for a while was very, very important. And that was my second round.